Alright, quick reality check before we start. You ever notice how the internet doesn't just reflect reality anymore? It kind of manufactures it, like a factory, assembly line, conveyor belt of vibes, narratives, enemies, heroes, and just enough evidence screenshots to make you go, huh, yeah, that checks out. Except, does it? Or did it just feel right for about 6 seconds, which is apparently all our brains need now? Because here's the weird part. We all like to think we're immune. We're the smart ones. We don't fall for dumb stuff. We do our own research. Which, let's be honest, usually means scrolling until something agrees with the suspicion we already had, then calling it a day. And I'm not judging. Okay, I am judging a little, but mostly, I'm including myself in that. Because this rabbit hole, it gets everybody eventually. Me. You. That guy in the comments who swears he's awake while reposting a meme made by a 15-year-old on Discord at 3 a.m. And that's what we're talking about today. How online subcultures don't just interpret reality, they build it, brick by brick, meme by meme, screenshot by screenshot, until one day you wake up and realize a whole chunk of the population is living in a parallel version of the world, running on a totally different operating system. Same events, same dates, same names, completely different meaning. And the wildest part? Most of the time, nobody planned it. That feeling? That's not accidental. And it's not just algorithms being annoying. It's not just people being dumb on the internet. What you're watching, what we're living inside, is something way more unsettling. Because at some point, online subcultures stopped reacting to reality and started manufacturing it. Now, before you roll your eyes and go, okay, Mo, here we go, another "the internet is bad" rant, relax. I'm not talking about memes melting our brains. Although, yeah, that's also happening. I'm talking about something quieter, slower, something that doesn't feel like manipulation when it's happening. It feels like discovery. It feels like you figured something out before everyone else did. It feels like you're finally seeing through the lies. And that's the dangerous part. But first, if this is your first time here, welcome to the rabbit hole. I'm Mo. I talk about all the weird, strange, and unexplained stuff happening on this planet. I don't do jump scare edits. I don't yell at you every 5 seconds. And I'm definitely not here to sell you some fake, exclusive footage with a red circle and an arrow pointing at literally nothing. I'm here to give you a different kind of experience. Just information, laid out in a way you can actually focus on, process, and understand without distractions pulling you every 2 seconds. If that sounds like your kind of thing, hit subscribe and join my small family. And before we kick off our trip through this mess, feel free to share what time it is right now and where you're listening from. I won't lie, I'm genuinely curious who's tuning in from around the world. Now, wear your headphones, grab your coffee, or whatever unholy energy drink is slowly killing your brain cells. Flip your phone over, turn off the lights, and focus. And like I always say, every story, even if it sounds the same, never really matches what I'm about to tell you. All right, so let's talk about subcultures. Not in the hot topic, I discovered punk rock last week way. I mean online subcultures, the ones that don't just like the same music or games, but share a version of reality. Every subculture starts innocent. Always. That's important. Nobody wakes up and goes, you know what? I'd love to join a digital ecosystem that slowly rewires how I interpret facts. No. It starts with curiosity, a forum, a subreddit, a Discord server, a comment section where someone says, "Hey, has anyone else noticed this?" That sentence alone has probably launched more alternate realities than any government psyop ever could. Because once you notice something, you start noticing everything connected to it. And the internet is very good at making sure you never notice anything that contradicts it. Back in the early 2000s, around 2012 to 2015, you start seeing the rise of what researchers later called networked belief communities. Not fandoms, not political parties. Communities built around interpretation, not just of events, but of meaning. Places like Forschans/poll/board, certain Reddit clusters before the big bans, niche Facebook groups, Telegram channels, spaces where the whole point wasn't sharing news, but decoding it. And decoding sounds smart, right? Analytical. Like you're doing homework while everyone else is asleep. But decoding only works if you're willing to accept that sometimes. There's nothing hidden there. These communities didn't just discuss events. They framed them. They decided, collectively, what something really meant. And once a frame sticks, everything after gets bent to fit inside it. Mass shooting, false flag, or proof of collapse, depending on the group. Pandemic, bioweapon, or power grab, or population control. Election, stolen, or rigged, or theatrical, pick your flavor. What mattered wasn't evidence. Evidence came later. What mattered was speed. Whoever explained the event first got to define it. There's a term for this in media studies: pre-interpretation. The idea that the first narrative people hear becomes the anchor everything else attaches to. And online subcultures figured this out way before most institutions did. You see it clearly in 2014 during Gamergate. No matter where you stand on it now, what happened there was a blueprint. A decentralized swarm of forums, YouTube channels, and Twitter accounts collectively shaping a shared worldview in real time. Not just about games or journalism, but about power, corruption, enemies, and identity. And once people realized that this works, that you could crowdsource meaning faster than any newsroom, it was over. Here's the part that always makes me uneasy. These spaces don't feel manipulative when you're inside them. They feel collaborative, like you're all piecing together a puzzle the rest of the world is too lazy or too brainwashed to solve. You're not being told what to think. You're being invited to think. And yeah, that's intoxicating. You start trusting the group more than outsiders, more than experts, more than institutions, because the group feels human, messy, honest, wrong sometimes, but honestly wrong. And then something subtle happens. The group starts rewarding certain conclusions, not explicitly. Nobody posts a rule saying, "Hey, only believe this." But posts that align with the dominant narrative get more likes, more replies, more validation. The ones that challenge it, they get ignored, or mocked, or labeled as glowing, shilling, or sus. You ever notice how every subculture develops its own language? Its own inside jokes, terms, shorthand? That's not just culture, that's boundary enforcement. It tells you who belongs and who doesn't. And once belonging gets tied to belief, reality becomes negotiable. By the late 2000s, this process was supercharged by algorithms. YouTube's recommendation system, especially pre-2019, was infamous for this. Watch one video questioning mainstream narratives, and suddenly you're 10 videos deep into a worldview you didn't even know had a name. Not because someone planned it, because outrage, curiosity, and fear have insane watch time, and the platforms didn't care what you believed as long as you stayed. This is where manufactured reality really takes shape. Not as a lie, but as a lens. A way of seeing that makes certain facts glow and others disappear. And here's the uncomfortable question I want you to sit with for a second. Seriously, pause if you need to. How many of your strongest beliefs did you actually verify yourself? Not, I saw a screenshot. Not, someone linked a thread. I mean, you checked it from multiple angles, with sources that disagreed with each other. Be honest. And look, I'm not saying everyone in online subcultures is delusional or malicious. Some of the best investigative work I've ever seen came out of random internet communities. Real corruption has been exposed that way. Real stories broken. But the same machinery that uncovers truth can also mass-produce certainty. And certainty is addictive, because doubt is exhausting. Before I continue, I want you to do one thing for me. Drop a comment. Don't overthink it. Just answer this. Have you ever been part of an online community that changed how you see the world? No judgment, no labels, just honesty. All right, here's the thing nobody likes admitting. Beliefs don't live in your brain. Not really. They live in your identity, in your sense of who you are, who you're not, and who you think is lying to you. Online subcultures figured this out early, way earlier than governments, media outlets, or your uncle who suddenly became a geopolitical expert during Thanksgiving dinner. Because once a belief becomes part of your identity, questioning it doesn't feel intellectual anymore. It feels like an attack. Let's say you join an online community because you're skeptical. That's usually the entry point. Skepticism sounds healthy, rational, almost noble. You're not a sheep. You're not swallowing headlines. You're asking questions. Cool. Respect. But then the questions slowly change. They stop being, is this true? And start becoming, why is everyone else lying about this? That shift matters. Because now, the conversation isn't about evidence anymore. It's about enemies, about deception, about insiders versus outsiders. And the moment a group defines itself against an enemy, even a vague one like the mainstream or the system, it becomes emotionally expensive to leave. You don't just leave ideas behind. You leave people. You leave status. You leave the version of yourself that felt awake while others slept. Researchers who studied online radicalization noticed this pattern over and over again, not just with political extremism, but with conspiracy movements, health misinformation circles, even some wellness communities. The content was different, but the psychological arc was identical. Curiosity to belonging to identity, to isolation, to reinforcement. And isolation is key here. Not physical isolation, social isolation. The subtle kind. The, I can't talk to anyone outside this group because they won't get it kind. Once that happens, the group doesn't just interpret reality for you. It becomes reality. This is why facts bounce off people sometimes like rubber bullets. It's not because they're stupid. It's because accepting the fact would mean tearing out a piece of their social world. And the internet is very good at making sure you don't have to do that. You ever notice how these subcultures always have explanations ready for why outsiders disagree? They're brainwashed. They're paid. They're scared. They haven't done the research. Those explanations serve a purpose. They preempt doubt. They turn disagreement into proof that the group is right. If everyone agrees with you, well, obviously, you're right. If everyone disagrees with you, well, that just proves you're over the target. Heads I win, tails you're asleep. And look, this isn't new behavior. Cult psychology has been documented since the 1950s. What's new is the scale and speed. You don't need a compound anymore. You don't need a charismatic leader with weird hair and a messiah complex. You just need a Discord server with good moderation and a shared Google Doc. Let me give you a real-world moment where you can see this happen almost in slow motion. March 2020. COVID hits. Global uncertainty. Conflicting information. Authorities openly admitting they don't know everything yet, which, by the way, was honest. But also a disaster from a trust perspective. Into that vacuum poured thousands of online subcultures, each offering not just explanations, but certainty. Some frame the virus as overblown panic. Others as an engineered bioweapon. Others as a cover for economic restructuring. Others as nature's revenge. Some even manage to hold all of those beliefs at the same time, which is honestly impressive in a deeply concerning way. What mattered wasn't which explanation was correct. It was how quickly each community locked into one version and defended it like a home turf. People weren't just arguing about masks or lockdowns. They were arguing about what kind of world they lived in. And once you've decided the world is run by incompetent liars, or shadowy planners, or collapsing systems, you don't just debate policy anymore. You reinterpret everything through that lens. A study out of MIT around 2021 showed that misinformation spreads fastest not when it's outrageous, but when it confirms a group's existing narrative with just enough novelty to feel like a discovery. Manufactured reality doesn't scream. It whispers, "See, this fits." And the internet keeps handing you examples until it feels undeniable. Now here's where it gets really uncomfortable. These subcultures don't just manufacture reality passively. Sometimes they actively coordinate it, not always maliciously, sometimes just enthusiastically. Think about mass reporting campaigns, hashtag pushes, dogpiling journalists, flooding comment sections, emailing sponsors, archiving pages before they're edited, freezing screenshots in time. From the inside, it feels like accountability, like citizen journalism, like fighting back. From the outside, it looks like a swarm shaping perception through sheer volume. And volume matters online. Algorithms don't know truth. They know engagement. If enough people repeat something with confidence, it becomes visible. And if it becomes visible, it becomes real to millions of people who were never part of the original conversation. That's how fringe ideas jump containment. Not because they're persuasive, but because they're loud, early, and emotionally charged. And once they cross that threshold, they don't feel fringe anymore. They feel like something people are talking about, which is a very dangerous sentence, because now journalists feel pressure to cover it. Platforms feel pressure to moderate it. Politicians feel pressure to comment on it. And suddenly, a narrative that started in a meme-filled forum is shaping real-world decisions. And here's the part I want you to really sit with. Not all manufactured realities are false. Some are partially true. Some are emotionally true. Some highlight real problems, but exaggerate causes, simplify villains, and promise clarity where none exists, which makes them stronger than lies. Because dismantling a half-truth takes way more effort than rejecting a lie. And the people inside these subcultures aren't villains. Most of them are just trying to make sense of a world that feels chaotic, unfair, and increasingly fake. But the danger comes when the search for meaning turns into a refusal to tolerate uncertainty. Because uncertainty is where reality actually lives. All right, pause for a second. I want you to check in with yourself. Has there ever been a moment where you ignored a piece of information? Not because it was weak, but because accepting it would have messed up your whole mental framework? No shame. Just notice it. And if this is hitting close to home, or if you're already arguing with me in your head, drop a comment. I actually want to know where you're landing on this. And if you're still here, still listening, hit subscribe. Not because I've got answers, but because we're asking better questions than most places are willing to. All right, let's talk about vibes. Yeah, I know. I hate that word too. But that's honestly the best way to describe what's happening. At some point, online subcultures stopped asking, "Is this true?" and started asking, "Does this feel true?" And once feeling becomes the filter, evidence turns into background noise. You can actually watch this shift happen if you look back at how information is presented now versus, say, 15 years ago. Back then, even bad arguments tried to sound boring. Charts, graphs, long explanations, citations buried at the bottom like vegetables you didn't want to eat but knew you should. Now it's screenshots, tone, timing, and emotional punch. A thread that hits different. A video that gives you chills. A post that makes your stomach drop just enough to feel important. Because emotion is fast, verification is slow, and the internet rewards speed. Here's where subcultures get really good at manufacturing reality without ever lying outright. They don't need to fake documents. They don't need CGI or deepfakes. Though yeah, those are coming in hot. All they need is selection. What they show you, what they repeat, what they ignore. You ever notice how certain communities circulate the same 5 or 6 examples endlessly? Same screenshots, same clips, same stories, recycled with slightly different captions like leftovers you keep reheating until they taste like truth. And every time you see it again, it feels more familiar, more obvious, more settled. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect. The more you hear something, the more true it feels, regardless of whether it actually is. And no, knowing about this effect doesn't magically make you immune to it. That's the fun part. Your brain still falls for it. Mine too. Online subcultures weaponize this by turning repetition into ritual. Sharing isn't just spreading information. It's signaling alignment. It's saying, "I'm one of you. I see what you see." And once information becomes a badge of belonging, nobody wants to be the person who ruins the vibe by asking annoying questions. Because questions slow things down. And slowing down feels like weakness in a space that values being early, sharp, and ahead of the curve. This is why emotional language dominates these spaces. Words like wake up, connect the dots, do your own research, Those phrases sound empowering, but they're doing something sneaky. They're shifting the burden of proof from the claim to the listener. If you disagree, it's not because the claim is weak. It's because you haven't looked hard enough. That's not persuasion. That's insulation. And once a belief system is insulated, it can survive almost anything. Here's a moment that really crystallized this for me. January 6th, 2021. No matter how you interpret that day, riot, insurrection, protest gone wrong, Fed op, media spectacle, what stood out wasn't just the event itself. It was how fast completely different realities solidified around it. People weren't arguing over details. They were arguing over what they were watching. Same footage, same timeline, radically different meanings. And online subcultures didn't just react to January 6th, they prepared for it. Some had already framed any future unrest as justified. Others had already framed it as inevitable proof of extremism. The interpretations were locked in before the dust even settled. That's manufactured reality in action, not editing footage, not hiding facts, but preloading meaning. And once meaning is preloaded, evidence just gets sorted into whatever folder already exists. What scares me isn't that people disagree. Disagreement is normal, healthy even. What scares me is how confident people are about realities they never personally verified, but feel deeply attached to. An attachment changes everything. Because when a belief makes you feel special, like you're part of a small group that gets it, losing that belief feels like falling back into a crowd you worked hard to escape. That's why online subcultures don't just offer explanations. They offer identity upgrades. You're not just someone who doubts vaccines. You're someone who questions authority. You're not just skeptical of media. You're media literate. You're not just cynical. You're awake. And who wants to downgrade themselves? Now let's talk about creators for a second. Because yeah, I'm one too. And I don't get to pretend I'm above this. Online subcultures thrive on content creators who act as translators. Not leaders exactly, but amplifiers. People who take the raw material from forums and turn it into videos, podcasts, threads. Clean it up just enough to be digestible, but not enough to lose the edge. These creators don't usually invent narratives. They curate them. And curation is powerful because it feels neutral even when it's not. What gets clipped? What gets emphasized? What tone is used? A raised eyebrow can do more damage than a fake quote. And once audiences emotionally trust a creator, that trust bleeds into the information itself. The vibe becomes the vetting process. He seems honest. She asks good questions. They don't sound like everyone else, which is true. But sounding different isn't the same as being right. And again, this isn't malicious most of the time. A lot of creators genuinely believe what they're saying. They're inside the same subcultures as their audience, breathing the same air, feeling the same certainty. It's a feedback loop. Audience rewards content that affirms their worldview. Creator produces more of it. Algorithm amplifies it. Worldview feels increasingly validated. Round and round it goes. And breaking that loop feels like betrayal from both sides. This is why walking away from a manufactured reality often looks like a breakdown from the outside. People lose friends, communities, purpose. They don't just change their mind, they lose their map. Which is why some people double down instead. Harder beliefs are easier than softer ones. Certainty feels safer than ambiguity. even when it's wrong. Here's something I want you to notice next time you're online. This is like a little experiment. Pay attention to how often people confuse confidence with evidence. A statement delivered calmly, assertively, with the right tone and timing can override a mountain of data delivered awkwardly. Humans are social animals. We're wired to trust tone before content. Online subcultures exploit that by creating an emotional atmosphere where certain conclusions feel inevitable. You're not convinced, you're carried. And once you're carried, resistance feels like swimming upstream against people you like. So, where does that leave us? I'm not going to sit here and tell you to just think critically, like that solves anything. Everyone thinks they're thinking critically. That phrase has been hollowed out. What actually matters is friction, slowness, discomfort. Manufactured realities hate friction. They hate pauses. They hate, I don't know yet. Real investigation lives there. And yeah, it's lonely sometimes. Before we keep going, I want to throw something back to you. Have you ever shared something online because it felt right and only later found out it was wrong or incomplete? What did that feel like? Did you delete it? Defend it? Ignore it? Drop it in the comments if you're comfortable. Those moments say more about us than the beliefs themselves. All right, this is the part where people usually want me to pick a villain. Like, okay Mo, cool breakdown, but who's actually doing this? Government? Corporations? Tech elites in a room with bad lighting and worse intentions? And yeah, those players exist, obviously. But if you're waiting for a single mastermind, you're going to be disappointed. Because the real power here is quieter, more boring, and way more effective. It's the power to shape what people think is possible before they ever decide what they believe. Online subcultures don't need to tell you what to think if they can narrow the menu of thoughts you consider reasonable in the first place. That's the trick. Think about how many debates you see online that feel intense, emotional, endless, and yet somehow constrained. Like everyone's screaming, but only inside a small fenced yard. Two sides, same talking points, same assumptions. Nobody's asking whether the fence itself is real. That's manufactured reality at its most refined. Not forcing beliefs, but defining the boundaries of imagination. Here's an example that hits close to home. Take surveillance. For years, the debate online has been framed like this. Do you care about privacy, or do you want safety? As if those are the only two options. As if the only question is how much freedom you're willing to trade. But notice what's missing. Almost nobody asks why mass data collection became the default in the first place, or who benefits long-term from normalizing it, or why opt-outs are always confusing, buried, or fake. The subcultures arguing about surveillance aren't wrong, but they're arguing inside a box that is handed to them. And that box defines reality more than the argument itself. Power doesn't always look like censorship. Sometimes it looks like menu design. What topics trend? What questions feel childish? What ideas sound crazy before they're even examined? Online subcultures participate in this too. Sometimes unintentionally, sometimes not. Because once a group settles on what questions matter, everything else fades into irrelevance. This is where the line between grassroots and influence operations gets blurry. Not in a spy movie way, No secret agents typing furiously in basements, but in a structural way. By the mid-2000s, intelligence agencies, marketing firms, political campaigns, and activist groups all reach the same conclusion independently. Online subcultures are force multipliers. You don't need to control them. You just need to nudge them. Drop a document here. Leak a clip there. Seed a question at the right moment. Let the community do the rest. Because communities are better storytellers than institutions. They add emotion, urgency, identity. They don't just spread information. They metabolize it. This is why some leaks explode while others die quietly. It's not always about how important the information is. It's about whether it fits an existing narrative ecosystem. If it doesn't fit, it gets ignored, or reframed, or mocked out of existence. That's not censorship. That's filtration by culture. And here's the part people really don't like hearing. You don't need bad actors for manufactured reality to work. Good intentions are enough. People who genuinely believe they're fighting lies. People who think they're protecting others. People who feel morally justified. Those are the most efficient systems of control ever created, because nobody thinks they're being controlled. They think they're resisting. And resistance feels good. It gives you energy, purpose, direction, which is why subcultures often feel more alive than mainstream spaces, more human, less sanitized. There's anger, humor, creativity, chaos. It feels real in a way polished narratives don't. And that's not fake. That's real emotion. But emotion isn't truth. It's fuel. And whoever learns to guide that fuel, not dominate it, just steer it, shapes reality downstream. This is why online subcultures don't stay online. They leak. They leak into journalism, into policy debates, into classrooms, into dinner tables. You'll hear phrases from niche communities suddenly spoken by people who have no idea where they came from. Talking points divorced from their original context, floating freely like spores. That's when a manufactured reality graduates into a shared one. And by the time institutions respond, it's already too late. You can't fact-check a feeling that's been socially reinforced for years. Now, before this turns into a full-on doom spiral, let me be clear about something. This doesn't mean truth is dead. It doesn't mean everything is fake. And it definitely doesn't mean nothing matters. It means truth has competition. And truth is slow. It requires patience, humility, revision. It requires saying, "I was wrong," which is basically the hardest sentence on the internet. Manufactured realities don't require any of that. They just require consistency and confidence. That's why they scale so well. So what do you do with this? Like, practically. Not in a motivational poster way. I'm not going to tell you to unplug and go live in the woods. First of all, Wi-Fi out there is trash. Second, that's just another fantasy. What actually helps is something way less dramatic. Expose yourself to ideas that don't fit neatly into your favorite frameworks. Not hate watching, not dunking. Actually listening long enough to feel uncomfortable. If a belief system never makes you uneasy, that's a red flag. If every event always confirms what you already think, that's not clarity, that's insulation. And yeah, this applies to me too. I actively try to read stuff that annoys me. Not because I want to agree with it, but because I want to understand why someone sane could. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you harder to manipulate. Another thing, watch how often something is framed as urgent. Share this before it's deleted. They don't want you to see this. This changes everything. Urgency is the enemy of verification. Real discoveries survive waiting. Manufactured realities don't. And finally, pay attention to how often a narrative tells you how to feel about information before you've had time to process it. Angry first, afraid first, mocking first, emotion first, analysis later, if at all. That order matters, because once you feel something strongly, your brain starts working for that feeling, not against it. Online subcultures didn't invent reality manipulation. Humans have been doing that forever. Religion, nationalism, ideology, same mechanics, different packaging. What's new is that now, anyone can participate in shaping shared reality. You don't need authority. You don't need credentials. You just need timing, tone, and an audience that trusts you. That's powerful and dangerous, but also kind of hopeful. Because the same systems that manufacture reality can also challenge it. They can surface real abuse, real corruption, real stories that would have been buried otherwise. The tool isn't evil. The unexamined use of it is. So the real question isn't who's lying to me. It's what am I emotionally invested in being true? That question alone will take you further than most debunking ever will. All right, that's it for this descent. If you made it this far, seriously, I appreciate you. Drop a comment telling me what part of this hit you the hardest or where you disagree. I read more than you probably think. If you want more episodes like this, slow, uncomfortable, but honest, hit subscribe and stick around. This channel only works if people are willing to sit with uncertainty instead of running from it. And remember, just because a story feels familiar doesn't mean it's finished. I'm Mo, and this was The Rabbit Hole.